Thank you. So I have to admit I have a little bit of an advantage with the other members up in this debate, and I sit on the House Appropriations Committee, so I have the actual numbers for what we've spent in this state. And so I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about some of the numbers that we've spent for education the last 10 years or so. Since 2000 to 2001, in that particular fiscal year, we have increased spending for education 55%. It's gone from $1.5 billion a year to about $2.4 billion a year. In terms of the per student spending that we now allocate to students, it's gone from $2,647 to $3,792. Now, part of the increase in the spending on education that we have done in this state was to install the three-tier licensure system. And I think that a lot of us agree that we need to reward our teachers. But a 55% increase in spending on education, when, as Carter Bunny mentioned, we've only had a 12% increase in population growth, add that to maybe a 1.5% year increase in inflation, and those numbers simply don't add up. And the fundamental question that I want to answer here tonight is, how do we budget what we spend on this state? How do we budget what we spend on education, public safety, all of the items that government pays for? And right now, again, being on the Appropriations Committee, one of the things that I've seen is that we look at projected revenues coming into the state, we allocate the budget, and then we usually try to set aside maybe 5% or so for savings. Now, I want to ask you all here tonight, is that how you budget your house? Do you only set aside 5%, or do you budget the way that I do, where I look at my revenue, I look at my essential services, how much does it cost for me to live in my house, how much does it cost for me to pay for my car, and etc. I put that into my budget, and then whatever I have left over with my income, I put into savings. In other words, I don't increase my spending based on the revenue that I have coming in. And we all know that we live in a state that depends very heavily on oil and natural gas. That's why our budget went from $4 billion in 2003 to $6 billion in 2008 when it hit its peak. We increased the size of the state government by 50%, again, when we have only had a 12% increase in our population growth. We have simply grown government too much. What I am trying to get across here tonight is that we need to take a completely different approach when it comes to budgeting our state. There are lots of things that I think that we can look at. One of the last points that I'd like to make, and I know I have just a few minutes left, when it comes to the income tax cuts that we put in back in 2003, and it's one of the things that I very much thank Bill Richardson for doing. If you want to look at what the true impact of those income tax were, you need to look at what the personal income tax revenue was to the state. And so we've heard that it cost us money, but when you actually look at the data from personal income tax revenue, in the year 2003, the year that the tax cuts were passed, personal income tax revenue was $923 million. And it's usually about 20% or so of the total revenue coming into the state. In 2008, the personal income tax revenue was $1.18 billion. In other words, the total personal income tax revenue went up after the tax cuts were enacted. That is something that we need to look at. We simply cannot go around throwing around numbers saying that cutting taxes leads to reduced revenue. The facts are in. Reducing taxes increased revenue specifically for personal income taxes. Thank you.